Good afternoon and welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. It is 2 p.m. on Monday, June 17th, and we are here today to entertain oral arguments in docket number 2019-320, wrong docket, docket number 2024-125-E. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. Present in the hearing room, we have Commissioner Justin Williams, Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, and Chair Belser. With us virtually, we have Commissioner Carolee Williams and Commissioner Caston. I recognize our staff counsel to read the docket.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners and everyone in attendance. We're here today for oral argument on the verified petition of Tanger Properties Limited Partnership for an order granting limited waiver of the South Carolina generator interconnection procedures in docket 2024-125E. In Commission Directive Order 2024-340 previously entered in this matter, Commission indicated that the matter should be set for oral argument and requested the petitioner, along with representatives from the Office of Regulatory Staff, Dominion Energy, and any other parties with an interest in this matter participate. Oral argument was subsequently scheduled for today, June 17, 2024 at 2 p.m. I believe the petitioner and representatives of all entities whose presence was requested by the Commission in its directive order are available, and the docket is in order.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Let's take appearances from the party. Who's representing the petitioner, Tanger Properties Limited Partnership?
Taylor Spear, Fox Rothschild, and I'm joined by a company representative, Justin Edwards, and appearing virtually is the developer of the facility from Plankton Energy, Dan Jafrida.
Thank you, Mr. Spear. And who's here for Dominion Energy, South Carolina?
Good afternoon, Chair Belser and members of the Commission. I'm Chad Burgess, and I represent Dominion Energy, South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. And the Office of Regulatory Staff?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. Ben Muschin on behalf of ORS.
Okay. Mr. Spear, we will be glad to hear from you regarding your petition.
Thank you, Chair Belser, members of the Commission. Nice to see you today. Appreciate you having us to hear from us on this petition. As you've heard, we're here for oral argument on the verified petition of Tanger Properties Limited Partnership for a limited waiver of the South Carolina generator interconnection procedures. I will likely refer to that as SC DN throughout my presentation because it's a mouthful, and if I try to attack it directly, I will likely stumble. Give you a bit of a roadmap on what we're going to discuss today so you have a heads up on where we're going. I'm going to discuss with you who Tanger is and why they're here, inform you about the facilities that they've developed. Then we're going to talk about really the rub and what's causing the problem, which is what is commonly referred to as the holdout under SC DN. So I'll walk you through that. I'm going to walk you through Tanger's various interconnection requests with its interconnecting utility, Dominion Energy South Carolina, Inc., and the information that we've gotten from the reports back from Dominion. I'm going to go through, I'm going to try to convey some insight from those interconnection requests and the reports through an operational analysis. Then I'll quickly conclude with a legal analysis as well as as Tanger's ask in this matter. I'm joined today by Justin Edwards. He is the SVP of Enterprise Operations. He's seated to the left over there. I'm getting a new view, being able to sit on that side of the room. That's kind of interesting. And virtually appearing is Dan Jafrida. He is CEO of Plankton Energy, and Plankton Energy is Tanger's consultant on developing these 6 solar facilities. Tanger is a publicly traded company. They trade under the New York Stock Exchange, ticker symbol SKT. They own 36 locations nationwide. Apologies to Phoenix, Arizona. Something had to go from this map, and they were up. So you're missing part of this map. They also have a facility in Phoenix, Arizona. The company is headquartered in Greensboro, North Carolina, and that is where Mr. Edwards is joining us from. I've told you we have an appearance virtually. Mr. Jafrida is in New York, and we greatly appreciate the chair's leave and permitting him to appear virtually. If you're wondering why I've brought company witnesses with me, it's just in the event that there's a question from the commission that I'm not able to address directly. So Tanger has a very comprehensive ESG report that they prepare every year. And I encounter a lot of these companies on a frequent basis. I can tell you that Tanger's ESG goals are quite robust and exceed some of the others that I've seen. So most notably, Tanger is attempting to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. And you can see that they have 9 centers already producing clean energy from on-site renewable solar. And they also have, in markets that permit it, they have clean energy procurement at 5 other centers. They also have something that is quite interesting. They actually have a climate statement in which Tanger publicly acknowledges man-made climate change before the SEC. Now we'll sort of bring it home to South Carolina. And you're looking at aerial photographs of Tanger's premises, as well as the larger context in which they sit. So photograph 1 is an aerial. On the right, you're seeing Tanger's Mall located in North Charleston. If you look above that, you can see the intersection of 26 and 526. We've probably all been there. To the left of that, you're actually looking at Boeing. And then above that is the Charleston Airport. Now, I've pulled out some of these so you can see them in a better detailed way. Number 3 is the substation that the Tanger premises is interconnected with. And we're going to have to talk about that substation and some data that we're getting from it. But obviously, the photograph on the right, number 2, that is an aerial of the mall where these solar facilities are located. If there are any questions, I would certainly invite the commission to interrupt me. I would love to make this as interactive as possible. If you have any questions, please just...
Mr. Spears?
Yes, ma'am.
These are planned to be rooftop solar?
So I'm going to get to that.
That's fine.
Yep. There you are. There are 8 buildings on Tanger's premises at the North Charleston Mall. Each building has its own meter, and there are 6 buildings that are going to have dedicated solar in the size and capacity that you're seeing before you. A wise question from Commissioner Belser. Building 8 and Building 7, part of that capacity will actually be a carport. I'm not exactly sure why it was built this way, but there's going to be a large carport facility that will have solar on top of it. Half of that will go to Building 7, and half of that, approximately half, will go to Building 8. Does that answer the question? Okay. So part and parcel to developing these facilities, Tanger filed 6 interconnection request applications with Dominion, and one of them was approved. So Building 4 in that top right corner, you have 200 kW of solar that's already been approved. It's already being constructed. As I understand, it has not been commissioned or energized at this time, but it is subject to an interconnection agreement and is being constructed as we speak. That's a photograph of the current state of construction. Let me make sure I'm not skipping something important. I did not say, and I need to tell you all, that the facilities will be net metered. So that makes Tanger a customer generator under 48-5020 and subject to DESC's solar tariff net metering tariff that we were all here and present on in 2020. Let me talk to you a little bit about the problem that Tanger is running into in its interconnection request. So this is what is often referred to as the holdout. I've heard it referred to as the residential holdout before as well. But bottom line is, if you are attempting to interconnect a generator to a public utility in the state, there are 3 different ways that the utility will study your facility. There is the 20 kW inverter process, there is fast track, and then there is what is generally referred to as full study. The commission will recall recently approving moving the public utilities in the state away from its serial queue interconnection process and into a cluster study process. This hopefully these facilities don't have anything, or are not at least intended to have anything to do with full study. The interconnection requests that were filed were for fast track, which is typically how you're going to see commercial facilities that are being developed in the state. It's a more streamlined way for the utility to study the facility. So under SC GIP, the procedures have actually prescribed what are called screens for fast track. And Dominion or Duke will take a facility, they'll do their power flow analysis, and they'll run it through these prescribed screens, and you either pass or fail. And in this instance, some of them failed fast track. But now I'll go back sort of to the beginning. In order to be able to efficiently interconnect residential solar, the interconnection procedures have this holdout, and it requires the utilities to reserve generating capacity on their substations. And it, as you may have read from the petition, this is good policy, but unfortunately, it's just not applied, or it's not in its application. I want to be clear that Tanger is not taking a position that Dominion is misapplying SC GIP. We're just taking the position that we need a deferral and a waiver from a limited part of it. So wisely, in order to be able to interconnect a lot of residential solar without full study, the backstop to that was, we're going to make the utilities reserve a bunch of capacity on every substation for residential solar, because it's not really being studied. It can be studied, but it's quite expedited. The calculation for the actual holdout is on the bottom right. I don't think how it's calculated is necessarily important, but I did want you to understand that it's a variable of many different things that is happening on that substation. So it's not just one thing. In my experience representing the solar trade, I have seen more often than not that this holdout requires 6 megawatts of generating capacity being reserved on every single substation for residential solar, whether or not that solar is being used or not. And in some cases, that actually means that a substation cannot take any non-residential solar whatsoever without causing various problems in the interconnection process like we're seeing. Candidly, I've had many commercial projects consult with me on the holdout. Tanger is the only one that has, really stuck to its ESG goals to say, this is worth going to the commission and discussing them with. So that is to say, this problem is not unique to Tanger. I've seen it many times. They're the only one that has been willing to bring it before you. Any questions? Okay. What you're looking at here is a slide based on Building 4. When an interconnection request comes into Duke or Dominion for fast track, they run the screens, and then within 30 days, they're required to generate a report, which provides some limited information about the interconnection. And I want to make those points clear to you because we're going to talk about them in a little bit. One thing that I would like for you all to know is that there's no reverse flow risk in any of these 6 facilities. As you know, these substations are really designed for one-way movement of power. Duke and Dominion do not want any additional power moving to their transmission facilities, so that's not an issue. That's important. A lot of these commercial facilities do run into reverse flow issues. That's not present in any of these interconnection requests.
Can you tell me what you're talking about when you say reverse flow?
Yes, ma'am. I can tell you, sure.
Are these facilities at Tanger, would these facilities at Tanger put energy on Dominion's grid?
Yes, ma'am. They are intended to be net metered.
Okay.
There will be energy that will be put upon Dominion's system, no question.
So it's not all going to be used behind the meter by the Tanger stores?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would say it differently. I would say the native load will not use all of the generation.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a much better way of saying it. So now, Tell me what you mean by reverse flow, please.
Sure. If there's too much generation on a feeder, so let's say that there's a distribution line. There's a lot going on that distribution line, a lot of load, right? This is one way that these interconnections differ from, say, a wholesale utility scale facility, which are typically transmission level interconnections. They're not dealing with load. Of course, there's load on the transmission line, but you could have Tanger at the end of their feeder generating electricity that every customer on that line is then interconnected to and will be using. Duke and Dominion want that condition to happen. Duke and Dominion do not want a lot of excess energy being pushed to the actual substation at the beginning of that feeder, because what can happen is, it's electricity, it moves. If you don't, I'll say it differently. What Dominion and Duke will do is they require you to make upgrades to that substation so that there's no chance that any electricity can go backwards and up to the transmission level. Does that make sense? It won't go past the substation.
It won't go past the substation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
So the other really important point about this is what we're doing is that we're collecting data about the interconnection requests that have, the one that was approved. We know that this one doesn't cause any problems, and it's for 200 kW. We also learned that, consistent with my experience, the way that Dominion calculates the holdout on this substation is 6 megawatts. So what that means is Dominion has to assume in its fast track study, and frankly for any study that would conduct, that there's 6 megawatts of residential solar on that substation. In this case, there is not. There's just a tenth of that. There's 687 kW of residential solar that's interconnected to that substation. And then there's 42 kW of additional solar. I'm not quite sure why that information is provided, but what I suspect is that's a commercial system that's not subject to the holdout. So the way the information was provided, I suspect that is a 40 kW commercial system, not subject to the 20 kW inverter process and holdout. What you're going to see on the bottom left, if I'm providing you some sort of pictograph, I want to make sure that you have the citation. So this screen report is in the record as Exhibit A. Okay. So if we could pause on that, and because we're definitely going to come back to the report that we received back from the first facility. The remainder failed. That's why we're here. They failed because with the 6 megawatt holdout, the studies that Dominion is preparing, that they are required to conduct, are demonstrating voltage issues on that feeder. Voltage is a bit of a complicated issue because there's a lot of variables. So generation is a variable of voltage. Load is a variable of voltage. But as you all know, it's important for the grid to maintain stable voltage. That is so everyone gets their power. And the most common thing from a voltage problem is flicker. So certainly something that the utility wants to avoid. They're required to avoid it. The reason that solar is important here is because for an inverter-based resource, the generation can drop very quickly, as you all know. Cloud comes over a solar facility, all of a sudden in a very short period of time, it's not generating as much electricity as it was 5 minutes ago. That can cause voltage fluctuation problems that cause Dominion a problem in properly delivering electric service to its customers. One moment. Just want to make sure that I'm telling you all that I need to do. Okay. This is under the interconnection procedures. If you fail fast track, you're given the option to ask for more information. You have to pay for it. It is an additional study. So naturally, we wanted to, before we came and talked to you, we wanted to have as much information as possible. And this is what we got back. So on building 8 for our supplemental review for that failed fast track interconnection request, what we learned is what we thought was the problem. Again, at the substation level, you'll have the facility, in this case for building 8, but this is representative of the whole of the denied requests, show unacceptable voltage issues at the substation. The fix for that is voltage regulators that you can install at the substation, but they're incredibly expensive. Dominion has told us they believe that the cheapest upgrade that they could make to this substation is $2.5 million. If we had to move forward in this condition, we would move to a facility study agreement, and they would tell us specifically how much, or within a range of tolerance, how much they believe it would cost to upgrade the substation. But you're absolutely looking at a $2.5 million minimum. And I do not speak for my client on operation issues, but this is the sort of thing that will always kill a commercial project. The margins here are very, very different than the margins that you would see for a wholesale utility scale facility. A $2.5 million cost makes the project upside down. They don't get built. My intent here with this slide is to try to give you a visual representation of what's happening on that substation. So we have, and this is for the approved request, building 4. We have 200 kW, that's Tanger's request. We have the 687 residential solar that's existing, that's subject to the holdout. We have this additional 42 kW piece, and then we have over 5 megawatts of generation capacity that's being reserved on that substation for phantom residential solar that's just not being used. I can't tell you everything about that substation because I'm limited to the data that I was provided by Dominion. I do want to make clear that this total capacity at the bottom, the 6.4 megawatts, the substation itself probably has more capacity than that. I don't know the total number, but I can demonstrate to you what I need to demonstrate to you without knowing the total number. What I would posit to you is the important part from this slide is that we know that this substation can take 6.4 kW of solar generation with no voltage problems whatsoever. That's why this interconnection request was approved. But this is what happens when you take the holdout away. You have all of Tanger's 6 requests representing 1.9 megawatts of generation. You have the same 687 kW of residential solar, and then you have that small sliver of what I believe to be is commercial solar. And so if you take the holdout away, you can interconnect all of Tanger's facilities with no voltage problems, and you'll have 3.8 megawatts left over for any other generation. But presumably, say you'd want to continue to reserve that for residential, whatever it is, that's, we don't have an opinion on that. But I just want to demonstrate that absent the holdout, there's no problem with these interconnection requests. And in fact, there's a capacity surplus on this substation for new generation. Now, a little bit of legal analysis. I'll move through this pretty quickly. You all were, I believe that you were all signatories to the orders for Bridgestone, Department of Defense. And as recent as Friday, I had to change this slide because there was an order that came out on Friday at 4:45 p.m. in which the commission approved a waiver request for Michelin. These cases all provide precedent to suggest that the commission has the authority to waive the South Carolina generator interconnection procedures. In fact, those orders make it clear that that authority exists. And I'm happy to go through these cases, but the bottom line, the commonality is the commission looks at what's happening to the interconnection customer. Is there delay? Is that delay rational? Does it make sense? If there's a problem and the fix is waiver and the waiver does not cause Duke or Dominion a reliability issue, then the waiver should be granted. And that waiver can constitute a lot of other things within its own power. So the commission has previously actually told Dominion how to manage its queue. You study the facility within 60 days. If that study is positive and appropriate, you get the interconnection customer and interconnection agreement. And that's what we're asking for the commission here. And then finally, I just want along that line, so there's just no reason for the holdout here. The holdout comes from way back in 2016 when the commission approved the generator interconnection procedures pursuant to Act 236. It's good policy and it makes sense, but we're 10 years on down the line and you still are reserving 6 megawatts of residential solar on a substation that only has 687 kW. And that's what you're seeing here. That's the same pie chart. The orange section there is the 687. So our position is that the holdout is unnecessary. It doesn't benefit the residential solar industry. It doesn't benefit Dominion. It's not necessary for reliability issues. And finally, I'll just leave you with a statement from the South Carolina General Assembly. As I've told you before, under these facilities, Tanger is a customer generator subject to Dominion's solar choice tariff. And I think you all have probably remember these words. I remember them. They were hotly debated in the net metering dockets that we had. But this is specific statutory language. And the General Assembly has told the commission, as well as the citizens of South Carolina, that it's our prerogative to reduce regulatory and administrative burdens to customer generators specifically, which Tanger is. And finally, I'll just conclude with Tanger's ask. Tanger asks that the commission find that it is in the public interest to issue this waiver and further issue an order requiring Dominion to promptly proceed with these remaining 5 interconnection requests. And if there are no issues, which we anticipate that there will not be any issues, to deliver interconnection requests to Tanger, and then finally not require any additional fees or requests. So at minimum, Dominion can rely on the data that it already has from pursuing the fast track for each 6 interconnection requests, and rely on that and not have to sort of recreate the wheel. And we would ask that additionally that there not be any additional fees required of Tanger. So in other words, I'll be more specific. Arguably, Tanger has lost its queue position because it did not move through SCGIP because of this holdout issue. I think technically if Dominion wanted to, they could require us to file, to start from scratch and refile interconnection requests. And we would ask that the commission issue an order making sure that that is not the case. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spear. Commissioners, do you have questions at this time, or do you want to proceed through the others? Commissioners, questions?
Chair Belson?
Commissioner Carol Lee Williams?
Thank you. You were asking us if we wanted to proceed, and because I'm remote, would proceeding mean hearing from Dominion as well as from ORS?
Yes. Do you want to hear from everybody before questions, or do you want to go ahead and ask questions? You want to reserve questions?
I'll reserve if I have the ability to ask Mr. Spear questions later.
Yes, ma'am. You will.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Spear. We'll come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners.
Mr. Burgess?
Thank you, Chair Belzer. I'll be brief. The company does not take any position with respect to Tanger's request. So to the extent that the commission grants Tanger's request, we will execute the interconnection standard pursuant to the commission's order. There was a couple of factual things that Mr. Spear brought up I just wanted to be clear with on the commission. The 42 megawatt, or excuse me, the 42 kilowatts that was referenced, that's commercial solar that's on the company system. The 687 kW, that represents residential load that's on the company system that's fed through that substation. The other thing that I would mention is the holdout that Tanger is seeking to basically be removed from their calculations. The company would continue to apply that holdout going forward because there's no waiver that's being asked of that we eliminate the holdout with respect to this substation. So if there is another entity that shows up and they're wanting to do something very similar to Tanger, we would continue to apply the holdout. So if there are other customers who wish to be interconnected under the holdout, we would continue to apply that to them. So this, in essence, this is just simply a request, as we understand it, to remove the holdout from the calculations that would allow Tanger to pass the fast track screen that they applied for. That concludes the company's response to this.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Mr. Mustin, on behalf of ORS.
Madam Chair, I'll just echo the letter that we filed in this docket. We do not take a position on this application.
Thank you. Okay. Well, let's see what questions. Commissioner Carolee Williams, you have some questions?
I do. I'm having a user error with my screen right now. So, Mr. Spear, thank you for being here and presenting this conundrum. The holdout vision was designed to ensure there was capacity for smaller users of solar. Would you agree that Dominion has the best understanding of the likely future need for small-scale solar on the circuit?
Well, I'm not sure that I can answer the question, but what I would say is that this requirement is not coming from Dominion. It's coming from the procedures that the Commission authorized in 2016. And in that time, only 11% of the capacity reservation is being used. So I would point you, Commissioner Williams, to that fact and show you that Tanger believes that's the best evidence of what's happening on that feeder. You know, if let me do this. Would you put my presentation back on, please? Thank you very much. Let me go to full screen here. So I want to be candid. There are some residential developments that were cut out of the aerial that's presented to the Commission as picture number 1. But this is largely a commercial area. Okay. So, you know, I think that the answer is that the history demonstrates the likelihood of further penetration of residential solar on this substation, and that it is unlikely.
And I understand that as a Charleston resident. I guess I'll ask Mr. Burgess, are you able to answer my question?
I can. The answer is I don't know. We have no idea whether or not the residential load in that area, if there's going to be an uptick on solar installations or not. All we know is that the Commission has carved out a holdout of roughly 6 megawatts to accommodate that. Now, you didn't do it circuit by circuit. You obviously, or substation by substation, there's a chart or a table rather in the interconnection standards that reflects, or the SCGIP, excuse me, that reflects the amount that Dominion has to reserve on that particular substation. And it's simply doing math and figuring out what that holdout should be. for that particular substation, it happens to be 6,000 kW, which is 6 megawatts. So like I said earlier, even if there is a uptick in solar, Tanger is not asking, and I don't want to speak for you, Mr. Spear, but I'm pretty sure Tanger's not asking that the holdout be abolished for this substation. It's simply asking that the holdout not be applied to the calculations in order to allow Tanger's proposed solar facilities to clear the fast track screens. And if you do that, then as Mr. Spear articulated earlier, Tanger will avoid the upgrades that would be required at the substation, which would be roughly the $2.5 million that he cited in his presentation earlier. So that's the effect of what's being asked. And I'm sorry, Commissioner Williams, that I don't know what the solar forecast looks like in that area, but I do agree with Mr. Spear. I think when you look at the map, it is a largely commercial area, but there are residential homes there as well. So to the extent that residential solar shows up on at that substation, the holdout's still going to exist, and they will be able to be accommodated. We've only got 687 kW present. There's a pretty significant headroom that is left on that substation to accommodate those residential customers if solar takes off.
And may I add to that, Commissioner Williams?
Please do.
So part of the presentation demonstrate a pie chart. And if the holdout is removed in this case, there's still over 5 megawatts of generation capacity on that substation for residential solar, even after assuming that a waiver is granted and that a 1.9 megawatt facility, these are obviously it's multiple facilities, but the total capacity of Tanger's interconnection requests, with that included, there's still over 5 megawatts remaining and left over and available for residential solar on this substation. Commissioner Williams, would you like for me to pull that up again and show it to you? It might be easier.
Thank you. And I apologize for not being in the room today. Sometimes life just has to happen in Charleston for me. So I appreciate your offering to do that, and I think it would help.
Okay. So this slide was to demonstrate what would happen if the holdout was removed. And on the top there, you see the notation additional solar. That's the commercial solar that's on this feeder that's interconnected to this substation already. So if you add that to Tanger's aggregate interconnection requests, which is over 1.9 megawatts of solar, then you add to that the existing 687 kW of residential solar that's on the substation, you still have the headroom, as Mr. Burgess described it, of nearly 4 megawatts on that substation for any number of interconnections, including future anticipated residential solar. And again, if you read, let me say this, because I didn't say this before. If you do hit the holdout, it doesn't mean that you can't interconnect any solar, whether it be residential or a wholesale facility. What it means is that your interconnection is going to be more complicated. So for instance, if once the holdout is reached, you can still interconnect residential solar, but you have to go through fast track. But in this case, well, and let me also say this, in this case, we know that anything larger than a 200 kW system after Tanger's first interconnection is going to cause voltage problems. We know that on this substation. It would look different on another one. So I don't know in between 0 and 200, say if it's a residential system, whether there would be voltage fluctuation problems or not. But I know that after 200, you're going to have them for any interconnection.
Mr. Spear, would you explain again where the upgrades, the responsibility for paying for upgrades kicks in and how that would relate to the holdout provision?
Be happy to, Commissioner Williams. Of course, PURPA requires that any upgrades that are necessary to interconnect a facility are borne by the interconnection customer. So that 2.5 million, and that's minimum, would be borne by Tanger, and it would kill this project. This project does not get built with a CapEx investment of 2.5 million in Dominion's system.
And I understand that.
Okay.
I guess I'm asking.
I think I can answer.
Okay.
If the holdout is removed, that $2.5 million goes away because there are no voltage issues.
And I'm thinking about if the holdout is removed, when in the future would somebody else be responsible because we gave you a waiver? Would we be creating a burden on somebody else in the future because we gave the waiver now? So I was trying to, in general, to just ask what triggers the 2.5 million.
Any interconnection can trigger the 2.5. It just it's really going to depend on the size of the system. I'm guessing. So I do not have these facts. I'm guessing there could probably be multiple smaller residential systems that are interconnected to that substation that won't trigger voltage issues. But I don't know that. And I really want everyone to understand that these are we're calling them voltage issues. They're really not present. The only reason that the system is demonstrating a voltage issue is because Dominion has to reserve 6 megawatts on the substation. They're not, you could interconnect all of these facilities, no voltage problems, if Dominion wasn't making these capacity reservations on the substation. So it's an aberration or a feature of the study process than a risk to Dominion's customers.
And Commissioner Williams, may I follow up on something?
You may.
Thank you. Mr. Spear, you may have seen my light come on when you said that anything over the 200 kilowatts would cause voltage problems. But are you speaking in mathematical, on paper terms versus what may actually happen? And I think you've clarified it with what you just said. But because of the holdout, the calculations will show voltage problems. Is that correct?
That's correct,
Okay.
Commissioner Belser.
But if the
Dominion is assuming that there is 6 megawatts of generation present.
as they are required to, is that
Yes.
okay?
That yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, that SCGIP requires them to do.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. But with
So it's academic.
okay,
yeah,
that's what I had understood to begin with, but then I just want to make sure I was clear on that.
There are no actual voltage issues.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Please go ahead.
Madam Chair.
Can,
Oh, I'm sorry.
thank you. I want to, unless you want to continue on that line, I can share.
It
If
actually,
you want to ask a few more questions, and then I'll be happy to pass it on to you. But if it's related to that same question, please go ahead.
I think it was, because if okay, I was going to ask.
Go ahead, Commissioner Caston.
Thank you. Mr. Spear or Mr. Burgess, if anyone knows, it seems like Commissioner Carolee Williams was asking something I was thinking, like, do you know how many other requesters similar to Tanger are there in the area? In other words, if I understood Commissioner Carolee Williams' question, if Tanger gets this, how many others are out there, and at what point will it be the tipping point that the last man in line has to pay?
Commissioner Casson, I cannot answer that question. I will say that pursuant to docket 2019-326E, which is the proceeding in which the commission is considering changes to the interconnection rules, that there has been discussion to completely remove the holdout. I do not feel that it would be permissible for me to discuss, to provide, the details of that discussion, because it's in stakeholder communications, and but I would be very I'll say it this way: Duke and Dominion will come before this commission, and that docket 2019-326E, and it will present to the commission amended interconnection procedures. I will be very surprised if both utilities not come to the commission with the holdout completely removed.
Well, Mr. Spear, you actually answered my next question.
Okay.
Because I was, going to say it appears that I guess you would be arguing that the holdout is not necessary, but I'll leave that there. Thank you, Commissioner Williams, for allowing me the opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Spears, for answering the question.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Carolee Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Spear, with your having ventured that information, is there any possibility of getting a letter in this docket covering that from those parties? I understand it may be premature, but having shared that with us, that would be really meaningful. Letter from the stakeholders is what I'm asking about.
I can't comment on that.
I don't think, We
I
know.
understand.
I would love for that proceeding to move more quickly, and I would love for that proceeding to have proceeded where we are today. But there are a lot of companies and stakeholders that are involved in that, and it's a complicated, docket that we had to move beyond the serial queue process into the cluster study process, and those communications are ongoing.
I understand. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask, though, and you're doing your job.
Thank you.
I understand. I guess the conundrum is, if we say yes to you all, and this might be a question for Mr. Burgess, is there, I instinctively understand that it's unlikely to be that we're going to come anywhere close to the holdout amount that we have a need for small solar. But said, if we make this decision, who else is out there that may make a similar application? And I understand there's capacity left before we have voltage problems, but aren't we kind of creating our own queue and I guess it's kind of a cluster queue in the circumstance. I need to stop and formulate the question, having gotten the general concern out there, but to either of you, how are we protecting the public if we were to entertain this waiver and then have another one coming up? How do we say yes to you and have the rationale that allows us to vet carefully the next request?
I think the answer.
Does that make any sense?
It certainly does. I'm hearing that. I believe that I'm hearing the concern loud and clear. And Tanger's position is that we wouldn't be having this conversation if there was not this very strange and unique feature of the SC JIP. And if it wasn't present, that would not need be a concern of any commissioner in this room. But if you wanted a concrete answer on that, it would require a discovery request to Dominion, which we can do, but that's certainly not my preference, not Tanger's preference.
Commissioner Williams, this is Chad Burgess speaking. I'll circle back to Commissioner Caston's question earlier. The company is not currently studying any other entity who may be wanting to install solar at this particular substation. So Tanger is it for the moment. does that mean that XYZ company won't come tomorrow and do the same thing? I don't know. We've kind of covered that already. But again, Dominion wrestles with the same things that you're wrestling with, and that is we enforce the SCGIP equally and without any discriminatory fashion toward anybody. And the rules are pretty clear and prescriptive to us. And then it's up to the customer to decide whether or not they want to have the holdout apply, pay for the upgrades that may be necessary as a result of that, or do they want to come here, which we have with Tanger, and seek relief from the rules that are, as Mr. Spears said in his petition, that are causing some financial burden and would make this project uneconomical, I presume. So that's the company's position on that matter, and I don't know if that helps you with your decision, but there are no other entities currently being studied on this circuit.
I appreciate your adding that, and that's good information. In that same vein, do we have, or can you share with us what the customer count is in that substation area and what the kind of forecasted growth might be in that area?
I don't know the answer to that as I sit here right now. I'd have to go back to the company and ask them to provide that information.
Would that be attainable? Might it be helpful to us to understand, it is, as I think about that area, it is an area with a lot of development and development that's probably not going to change for a while. There's a lot of wetlands, but I don't know the boundaries of the substation. I wonder if that would give us rationale that would help us to make a decision.
It might. I don't know. I'm not sure what kind of goes into the decision-making calculus when presented with a question like this. But I'm certainly happy to go back to the company and ask them for the number of customers who are served off of that substation and the various circuits. And I'll be happy to report back if that's what the commission wants me to do.
Well, I've learned that I need to be really specific with that. And I think it would only help if we're addressing growth and the ability, forecasted growth, and then capacity that remains at that substation. If that's answerable, I personally think that would be helpful. It might not be a black or white kind of bit of guidance, but do you think that larger question of projected growth, have you studied it? What do you think the projected growth is going to be there, and what's the difference between the load that you have on it now and the future load that you anticipate?
Again, Commissioner Williams, I'm sorry that I keep telling you I don't know, but I don't know what projections the company has done with respect to load growth off of that specific substation. I think we all know through various hearings, South Carolina is the fastest growing state in the union, and that's organic growth where people are coming here to live. The Low Country is a hotbed of activity, as evidenced just by driving on the roads down there this past weekend. So I presume there is growth in that area. The amount of growth there is, I don't know. The amount of folk, and even if you do have growth, I think the next question is going to be, do you anticipate that growth wanting to avail themselves to solar facilities, which puts another point of information into the calculus. But I'm very happy to go back to the company and ask them if they have any low growth projections, specifically as it relates to that substation. I'm happy to go back to the company and ask them how many customers are served off of that substation. There's, as you probably saw on the map, there's a very big customer right nearby there, which is Boeing. And I'm sure that they've got an interest in that substation as well from a demand perspective.
Sure. And the last thing any of us would want to do is impact some of those existing customers negatively because of some kind of trigger that this would lead to. But I appreciate your offer to go back and talk to the company about that. And I think you understand what I'm asking, and I look forward to reviewing what you all submit if you're able to. I have one other line of questioning before I turn over this microphone, and I think it goes back to Mr. Spear, and it really has to do with your request for a limited waiver in the public interest. I don't think I've quite gotten the wording, the verbiage that you used right, but I wanted to hear more about what the source was, what the so that it was limited public interest waiver, and just wanted to understand the source of that from either statute or an order, and so that we could think about that more clearly from a requirement perspective. You know, what would meet that?
Yes, Commissioner, and I will be happy to answer that question. I'll go back to my presentation so you can see very clearly where that language has come from. That is not language that I have developed myself. That's language directly from the 3 prior cases. But I did want, and I'll get there, I did want to go back to the question that you posed and Commissioner Caston seemed to have some concern about. And because inherent in the question is a preference for one customer over the other. What it appears that the concern is that we would prefer residential solar over Tanger solar. And so that's certainly concerning to Tanger as well. That this is the inherent risk in the serial queue process that all developers have to manage. And it's, you know, the first person there bears certain risk. The folks that come after that bear different risks. And so, you know, if I would caution the commission against preferring solar for one class of customer over another, because in Tanger's view, or my own, it does seem that inherent in the inquiry that you made is that there's some edict to prefer residential solar over commercial solar, like Tanger's interconnection requests, and I would argue that that's not present. But going back to the language itself, if you would kindly pull up the presentation. Thank you. Okay, so Commissioner Williams, as I discussed in the presentation, there are 3 prior instances in which the commission has issued a waiver from the interconnection procedures. And the language of public interest is coming directly from those orders. So it is the commission's language. It's not something that's in a statute as far as I've seen. Well, so that's not entirely correct. The orders themselves do cite to a commission reg permitting the commission to waive any of its rules, much less the generator interconnection procedures. And I'm sorry that I don't have a cite. I can certainly pull that up. But the information is there. And if you give me a moment, I can give you a citation to the actual rule.
That's okay.
Okay.
I just wanted it to be clear what you were basing it on, and just wanted to be a little bit more specific if you could be. But that's I understand what you're referencing.
Okay. So
I just, well, no, you go ahead and finish.
The language is, this slide has the actual language that's in the first order.
Right.
The commission concludes and finds that it has the authority to waive all or any part of portions of the requirements of SC JIP procedures in the public interest. So those 2 words, public interest, show up in all 3 of these cases.
Okay. And just recall that, sometimes commissioners ask questions that, I don't know. I don't know how we ask questions without, sometimes you have to ask a question just to understand something better. And the bias may be there and it may not be there, but I appreciate your kind of identifying that, but it's part of how we learn.
Yes, ma'am. Happy to do it.
Okay. Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, I'm not sure who's like, Jay Williams?
Oh, it's Williams.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to try to be as quick as possible. So when I go back in, Mr. Spear and Council, when I go back and review the transcript and maybe even the video, I want to make sure that I'm able to clearly walk through the issues. I appreciate your presentation, but we've been here for a while. And I want to make sure I understand what has been said. There are no voltage issues at present, right?
The voltage issues only present themselves because of the 6 megawatt holdout capacity reservation that the procedures require Dominion to assume.
On paper. That's an academic exercise.
Correct.
That's either on paper or a computer.
Correct.
But-
And it is possible, even if you interconnected all of this solar, that no voltage problems would happen, but Dominion must anticipate that possibility for resilience.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I just want to make sure it's clear to everyone here that right now today, there are no voltage issues that will create harm from any uninterested or party not associated with this docket.
Tanger could connect all 1.9 megawatts of its solar PV generation and not create any voltage problems on this substation, correct?
You talked about the inherent risk of being a developer in this area. Is it fair to say, based on your understanding of the process, that at some point in time, depending on when you come, when you're in line, that or when you decide to start a project, that you may be faced with determining whether or not the project is worth the upgrades, the cost of the upgrades? Not here today. You talked about what your client would be willing to do and what they would not be willing to do. But if I understand you correctly, and I just want to confirm, at some point, all developers may have to take into consideration that there may be upgrade costs associated with their project.
That's correct. In this case, the developer is a customer of Dominion, so it's Tanger. But you're correct. And at some point, if nothing changes, and it will, but if nothing changes in 10, 20 years, someone's going to have to make an interconnection will probably trigger an upgrade to that substation at some point, whether it's Tanger or not.
Exactly, and that's my point. So whether or not the waiver is granted here today or not, at some point the decision will be made.
I think that's fair to say, yes, sir.
And that's my last question, but I just want to ask you a question about a story. You ever heard of the story of King Solomon and splitting the baby?
Yes, sir.
One of the interesting things about that story, the actual story, and then when I hear the phrase splitting the baby used, I'm just trying to split the baby, it confuses me. Do you know why?
Because you can't tear a baby in half?
Well, you can, but that's not what
The
happened.
consequences you wouldn't...
Not only that, that's not what happened in the story. The goal was just to determine who the actual mother was, not to give the women 50% of a baby. So in our decision making, I could tell you sort of a little frustrated there with some of the questions, but I just want to confirm or reaffirm what Commissioner Williams said. We're just trying to figure out our left and right limits, and we appreciate your patience and indulgence as we do so.
That's my job. You're welcome.
All right, thank you. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Vice Chair Powers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What has come up in my thought process, Tanger has the place in North Charleston. They have a place in Bluffton area down near Hilton Head. I assume there's one or two upstate. Is this something they're looking at in other locations as well in state?
I do not know the answer to that question. There is a new facility that's being developed in Myrtle Beach as well. I can get you an answer to that question very easily. just tell me. Tell me directly. Yeah, I mean, every year we reevaluate. Commissioner, the intent is to develop more solar in South Carolina. Decisions have not been made at this time. I'll offer a little additional context, is that the holdout may not be calculated the same on every substation.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioners, anything further? Gentlemen, thank y'all very much for appearing today and giving us some things to think about. We will close this proceeding and either request further information or make a decision, depending on how it goes. Mr. Burgess.
Chair Belzer, I do have an action item that I've taken from Commissioner Williams. So
Yes, sir.
We'll follow up on that.
Yeah. As soon as possible would be good.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. And with that, is there anything further, gentlemen? Hearing nothing, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.